Hey, thanks everyone for watching. And astrologer Lyuben Meshikov from Bulgaria has joined me today.
Yes,
And this
nice
is
to meet you.
thank you for joining. And this is the first time for Lyuben um, is having conversation with me. And Lyuben is from Bulgaria. He's a traditional astrologer, and he's been quite active on social media um, in the traditional astrology circles. So, and thanks, Lyuben, for joining. I've been meaning to have this conversation for quite a while because I think both of us have been following each other's work for quite some time,
Yes,
and it's finally good to have you. I think we already spoke about this a few months back, but I think finally we got this going. I mean, we are getting this going today. So the idea today that is the conversation is about like astrology was always predictive. Astrology is inherently predictive, and astrology was always predictive until the early 20th century, or probably towards the late 19th century. So, but today's astrology, with the advent of modern astrology, psychological astrology, and Jungian ideologies into astrology, and also further the development of evolutionary astrology, astrology is not as predictive as it was earlier. There are astrologers who are predictive, but still, because of the the modification or dilution in the astrological traditions of the modern world, I think prediction is not really accepted, because not that astrology cannot be predictive, but people have changed, and astrologers have changed, and they have kind of uh, clouded, or probably closed their mindset, or they have remained unopen to the idea of prediction or objective forecasting. So that's what we're going to talk about today for I don't know how long, but I hope we can kind of justify that the first 1900 years, or probably 2000 years of the astrological tradition that we know of, is very rich, and it is still very much applicable, and also it's not outdated as of today in postmodern era of astrological traditions that we are living in. So I think this is the context, if I kind of put it correctly. But where do you want to start, Lumen? Like, do you have any something that I want to kind of begin with is like uh, I I want to kind of start the discussion by saying that astrology is not different from, it's not vastly different from any other subject. I mean, every subject is different, but in terms of contextual ideology, or in terms of application of real life, astrology is not very different from many other subjects, and it should not be different from many other subjects, because uh, the way astrology is being practiced today is like people are, I mean, astrologers are not ready to predict, and they don't accept uh, pinpoint predictions. So the thing is, they're not ready for objectivism. So people want sugarcoating, and I don't mean to kind of put off the modern traditions, but still the truth is largely heard uh, through objectivism. With subjectivism, we can kind of polish and manipulate, or whatever we want to do. I think it's possible, but in terms of objective realism, I think it's very difficult to kind of uh, do sugarcoating, or try to there is only one end to an objective idea. So if there is something that's present in the chart, so it's and an astrologer kind of has an interpretation towards it. If you want to put an objective um, perspective to it, there should probably be only one. But that's not the case with subjectivity of what we want to talk about. So there are so many dimensions that we can bring in terms of subjective ideologies of a specific placement in an astrological chart. So the so my fundamental idea is that astrology should not be so different from many other subjects. Like, for example, people go and visit a doctor in order to take care of their health. So if they want to take care of their health, I think they should be ready for diagnosis. if they're ready for diagnosis, they should be ready for something that might actually turn out to be negative. So no one goes to a doctor and says that you should not diagnose something negative. It is unethical. So it's impossible. So likewise, you go to an engineer and you want to civil engineer and you want to construct a house. So you cannot. So if a civil engineer says that you need 4 corners to build a house, you cannot say that you need to build a house with 2 corners. So you need to let the engineer do the job. So it's kind of pretty much true for every tradition. So for example, if a physician is kind of diagnosing something very negative, how can he say that particular thing or his particular diagnosis to the client is the way of communication? So I think a lot depends on communication, but the idea of astrology as a predictive tool should never change. That is probably the conversation that we are going to have for the next hour or so. And one more thing that I wanted to mention is, like, astrologers always played a major role in the society, just like any other professional, like a doctor or someone, any physician or any other professional. So astrologers played a similar role in the society, and their role was equally important. But that is because of the objectivity that's inherent to astrology. But in today's context, since the advent of like modern astrology, and probably after the entry of the Alice Bailey or Alan Leo or Dane Rudhyar, the fundamental usage of astrology kind of changed, and it should that shouldn't have been the case, but that should have been one of the areas of astrology, but that shouldn't have kind of taken over and ruled the entire field of astrology, where after 60 or 70 years, astrologers are thinking that predicting something is not good for astrology and it is a sin. But if you go back to our ancestral traditions, I think astrology was inherently predictive, and that is the only way we can use astrology for. So, and the idea of prediction is probably the only way of conveying the truth. So this is what I wanted to say. So I think I'll let you kind of take over the conversation, and we can just build from there.
Yes. First, thank you for your invitation. Like you said, we have been following each other for a few years. I really liked your book about Virtaria. I liked the translations you made, and I really liked how you put an emphasis to the 12th part, one technique that is very underestimated,
Right.
Probably because most people cannot understand it and to implement it in their readings. But anyhow, I fully agree with you that astrology was prediction-based. Its name was judicium. This is the Latin word, and the Latin word comes from the Greek word apotelismatica. This is all related to prediction. I make a difference between the Western astrology mainly in 2 ways, traditional and modern. The traditional is, like you said, to the time 20th century, to the time of Alan Leo, and modern is after Alan Leo. I will later say why I think Alan Leo made so much, how he made the change, and why the prediction from astrology went away. I will say what are the main changes between traditional and modern. And when somebody says Western astrology is one, no, it's not one, because modern is a whole different story. For example, the differences between traditional and modern. I really liked this from Georgi Mirskoi, the traditional astrologer, who made this difference between the two astrologies, and I will make use of it. In traditional, we have systematization and rationalizations. In modern, we have emotions, right? In traditional, we have faith, we have the outer world. In modern, we have the inner world and psychology. In traditional, we have the 7 planets, and we have lots. In modern, we have minor aspects. We have an aspect like quantile, if you know it. Quantile is a very important aspect. Yes, it gives statistics. We also use in modern a lot of Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. They are really important. Also, like I said, the aspects. In traditional, we have major aspects. In modern, we have minor aspects. And in traditional, the ascendant, the rising degree was very important. This is how the horoscopic astrology evolved, when there was a rising degree. But in modern astrology, the most important thing is the sun, the so-called sun-based astrology. You see a person, and he says, I'm born in August, I'm a Leo. And you think, oh, he's a Leo, he's such a pompous, right? This is all you need to know, that he is a Leo. Nothing more from astrology, sun-based astrology. In traditional astrology, we have temperament. In modern, we have character.
Right.
In traditional, we speak about the fate, and it's fate-based, and how to use the potential of the natal chart. But in modern, we speak about vibrations, how to transform, and etc. There is no fate. Everything is could be transformed and evolved. Also, in traditional, we have different branches: horary, mundane, electional, and like you said, predictive and natal. Predictive was the main idea.
Right.
In modern, we have what? Mainly it's karmic and psychological.
Sure.
I think these are the main differences. Of course, the so-called free will in the modern astrology, and traditional is based more on the fate, and that is why it can be predicted, because there is fate. Okay, we have something we can predict. I can read why I think this is a very good book, A History of Horoscopic Astrology from James Holden.
Sure.
And why I think that the shift was made in 20th century, when all this traditional astrology that I mentioned, major aspects, lots, and character, is using the potential, the the temperament. It
Right.
comes from the times of Dorotheus, Hellenistic times. We go to Persian, Arabian. We go to medieval, Renaissance, to the time of Willie, and we see that there is some kind of a system. You get one technique from Dorotheus, and you can see the same technique to the time of William Lilly. But then comes our Leo, and it is destroyed. Why is that? Let me read. Towards the end of 19th century, the famous Alan Leo abandoned his career as a traveling salesman and started a magazine, Modern Astrology. His magazine was read both in English and abroad. Many people had their interest in astrology aroused by ordering a horoscope from Leo. This meant that he made horoscopes that are more general, and people like them. The less expensive versions were assembled from standard delineation of planets in signs, like Venus in Leo is that and that, while individually delineated charts were available for a higher fee. So he made a magazine for profit. He was a salesman, not an astrologer. He was not a court astrologer like was Abu Mashar or Mashallah and etc. He was just a salesman. He wanted to make money from it. Another what our Leo made. And finally, one important event in our Leo biography led to the severe and irreversible consequences for the whole Western astrology. He was 2 times judged on the basis of witchcraft act, pretending and professing to tell fortunes. So, his defense attorneys said the thesis that the delineations of his horoscopes showed only tendencies, and these delineations were not related to predictions about the future events. The switch by Alan Leo from predictive statements to psychological in his horoscope analysis was entirely consistent with his long criticism of traditional astrology and his ambitions to create a new and modern type of astrology, spiritual psychological astrology. So this is why the switch came, because he wanted to make money. He printed magazines with some based astrology science, and what authorities went to him, he just said, "Oh, these are too general statements. This is not prediction." And one important thing is why people like such stuff when they read Sun and Leo is this, because of the Barnum Effect. I don't know. Do you know about the Barnum Effect?
But can we just discuss about Barnum Effect a little bit, because maybe some of
Yes.
them might not know about
Yes.
it. Yeah.
Barnum Effect, also called Forer Effect in psychology, the phenomenon that occurs when individuals believe that personality descriptions apply specifically to them, despite the fact that the description is actually filled with information that applies to everyone.
Right.
This is. And here, finally, for this topic, why there is quite a difference between traditional astrology and modern, which I call not astrology, I call spiritual psychological astrology. Let's see one horoscope example from the time of Byzantine Emperor Constantine VII. According to the Rudhyars, as the rulers of the triplicity of Venus, the first and second, are in the good places and are free from the rays of the sun, they signify a happy marriage. The ruler of the western angle being square to this angle and free from the rays of the sun, and contemplated by favorable stars, brings a prudent marriage, thanks to which his position will improve. And marriage will be on the 17th year of birth. The lot of marriage is located in Taurus. As this lot is stuck by the figure of Saturn square, the marriage will be married. The marriage will be marred by the death of his wife. We see what? Predictions. And let us see, and yes, objectivism. And let us see one horoscope from modern astrology. The ruler of your horoscope is Venus, located in the first third of the fifth house. He is the prompter of your role and the manager of events in this incarnation, through which you gather experience and can use it now to achieve your goals more effectively. You need to show strength and ambition in the tough fight against authorities in the pursuit of your ideas, so you don't go off the rails. Patience and constraints will stop you. Your life will be diverse, but your reasons must be perfect, that they are beyond doubt, and your arguments should not be disputed. This is modern astrology. Barnum Effect. Did you see here prediction? You are mute.
It's more about a generic idea of particular placement, but not really a prediction. So, but so the problem here, or the biggest differentiating factor that we find here, is that there is a little bit of determinism that is available, or that we can witness in traditional astrological texts, as opposed to the modern astrological texts, because I think besides the traditional astrological texts being deterministic, I think modern astrological texts, the reason why they are kind of not very deterministic is because of the ideology of the religious or Christian tradition that kind of took over along with the New Age movement around the 1870s or 1880s. And this Theosophical Society was also kind of taking off at that particular point of time. And Christianity is, I don't know much about Christianity, but I think Christianity is kind of heavily promoting the idea of free will and does not really believe in the concept of fate, which basically I think brought about a lot of changes in terms of how astrology was practiced and how astrology was perceived, both among the astrologers and among the masses, that is the clients. So this entire phenomenon of free will kind of discounted the fact that there is something at work which is probably uh, not really modifiable or something that cannot be manipulated. So I'm not disagreeing with free will, but I think we should understand that majority or at least substantial portion of our life is kind of uh, is probably fate oriented or deterministic. I also think the word karma has a lot of uh, intricate meanings that we can attribute to, but I think the new age movement kind of uh, they kind of corrupted the idea of karma, and they weaved their own ideologies based on just one idea that karma means that we do something and we just get it back, but that's not how it works. In single word, or sorry, in a single sentence, what karma means in terms of definition is that the moment we make, I mean, we are all responsible for the choices we make in our lives. So for example, if I choose to be, see, let's say I have a prominent Mars placement with Aries rising, I have Mars in the 8th house of Scorpio. So it depends, like I could be an underworld don, or I could be a undercover spy agent. So there can never be one manifestation, but based upon the other planets, we can come to an objective conclusion, saying that this would probably be the person's vocation or something like that. But it is probably it's ultimately going down to the choice of the person. But sometimes we don't have really choices in our lives, so we have to make some decisions with just probably with only one option available. So there are multiple varieties of karmas which I don't want to kind of get into here, but with the culture and tradition from where I come from, uh, life is largely uh, it's kind of fate oriented and deterministic. Okay.
Yes, I also believe in karma. Everything is karma. Okay, we're fine with this.
Yes.
But they in Western astrology, and especially the modern astropsychological astrology, does not have the tools that Eastern astrology is Vedic how that has about the karma.
Yeah.
I know how Western astrologers, no, not astrologers, astropsychologists, because they do not make predictions. Astropsychologists delineate a chart. They look for Pluto. They look for 12th house, for the 6th house, for the nodes, and Saturn. And that's how they look for the karma in one person's life. In Vedic, I don't know much about it. You know probably better than me more. The whole chart speaks of karma. There are divisional charts and etc. But yes, if there is a free will, how astrology can be a science? Okay, a science we say this and this happens because modern astropsychologists, followers of Alan Leo, they say that astrology is science, but they believe in free will. How this could be possible? This contradicts itself. It is free will. I can do whatever I want. I can become a doctor. So they cannot predict what I will do. But in traditional astrology, we have fate, and most of the things can be seen in a chart. And
sorry to interrupt, but I think Chris Brennan gives in his book in a very concise manner about the idea of determinism. So there is complete determinism and there is partial determinism.
There are 3 types of fate in Hellenistic astrology. Yes.
Yeah. So it's that's what the idea of determinism is: complete determinism, partial determinism, and it's largely influenced by the signs and causes. So whether astrology is a causal phenomenon or a symbolistic phenomenon, But yeah, I think you can go ahead.
Yes. So yes, there are different types of how set fate in Hellenistic times. There's Mermin, Ananke, and Pronoia. There are different types, but it's all related that most of our life is on some path. You walk on this path, and you have sometimes choices you can make. You go there, you go there. Like you said, like I read in this horoscopic example of the chart of the Byzantine Emperor Constantine VII, you see predictions. Astrologers did that. They predicted. They wanted to know if the kingdom will survive, if at that time of a war, like at these times of war between Russia and Ukraine, the court astrologers will determine whether the Tsar or the main wartime leader will survive the war, how it will go. They were not interested in the psychological content of the person. This is not so important. This is why Alan Leo made this switch, and I'm not sure that people who follow modern astrology, astropsychological astrology, know that there was astrology far before 20th century. And at that time there was real astrology, because real astrology is to make predictions. The other stuff is astropsychological. You speak Barnum Effect, general, like this example of Venus. What is Venus in your chart? People have in 21st century, they have problems. When people come to me, they ask me, who killed my car? Who killed my cat? Will my car get better? And concrete particular problems. They want their problem to be solved by a prediction. They are not interested so in the high vibration and etc. What should I say to person when he comes to me, asks me a horror question because I specialize in horror? Who killed my cat? What to tell him? This happened because he had a past karma. You probably killed a cat on one of your past wives. You should have a higher vibration. You should love people. You should pray more. Okay, we all know this, but how this is going to help the person? It cannot help a person in this way by speaking more general stuff. And probably you want to speak about Bumashar. He wrote the whole defense in astrology, because I'm very sad when I put my television on and when I see some young girl, beautiful in her early 20s, and she said she's an astrologer, but she hasn't read one book or two books. But she says I'm an astrologer because Venus in Cancer is that, because you are a sun in Cancer, you're not so emotional. And this is how they wove astrology. And people don't think that astrology is a serious thing because of such people like Alan Leo, who made general horoscopes. They made a very low level of astrology. And this is not a real astrology, this is astropsychology. Well, another example, here is probably most of traditional astrologers know this book, Abumashars on the revolutions. This is how at that time they made the predictions for the king. They made a solar return. 6, 7, 8 techniques, very difficult material. And let us, sorry, it's in Bulgarian, but anyway,
no problem.
One book of modern astropsychological, how they make predictions. Howard Supporters, Gods of Changes. Here we have a book dedicated to the transits of Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. That is how they make predictions. The transits of the outer planets. One simple transit. And here we have tarot book with a lot of techniques, 7, 8 techniques in one solar return. This is why I say there's quite a difference between traditional and modern astrology, astropsychological astrology, and astrology is only one in Western. This is traditional astrology. The other thing after Alan Leo is astropsychological astrology. That's quite a difference.
You know, the idea of predictions and the times in which astrologers were practicing their art or science during the ancient or medieval period is completely different from what we are doing today. Because, for example, I think I've been immersed into Theophilus of Edessa, translated by Eduardo Gramaglia and edited by
He
Dr.
has a
Bender.
war chart, yes.
War chart. So apparently Theophilus was present in the midst of the battle, and he was casting military horary and military elections. So, and astrologers in the medieval era, they did not have any room for complacency or subjectivism. They just wanted, or they just had to kind of come out with concrete objectivism and realistic objectivism, because any decision, astrological decision that they make will be followed by the king or the
Yes, and if you make a wrong predictions,
yeah.
they can kill you.
Yeah, they can kill you, but you can also be responsible for the death of so many soldiers and probably the king also. So, in which case the astrologer might flee and save his life if the king is dead. But ultimately, I think it will be a massacre, and there will be a lot of death and loss if there is any mistake that is done by the astrologer. So, astrology was so black and white during those days, and even I think in probably because of the continuous or unbroken astrological tradition in India, Jyotish is largely still black and white.
Yes.
And the mindset of the people is also so objective oriented, because they want pinpoint answer for questions. So people can become an astrologer here only if they can actually predict things. So if they cannot predict things, they cannot be an astrologer in India. So there is no scope for any kind of an astrologer who talks about psychological matters. See, we can talk about psychological matters, we can talk about temperament, and I respect and probably kind of I'm interested in some of the modern works as well. But I see, for example, a transit might not necessarily be really explicit in terms of what kind of events are happening in my life, but a transit is always felt internally. So if Saturn and Mars are conjunct, or if Saturn and Mars are opposing each other in transit, there will be some kind of a mental pressure that we are already feeling from inside. And to kind of understand that, or to kind of decode from a psychological level, I tend to kind of go back and read some of the evolutionary or psychological astrological stuff. But in terms of reality, or in terms of what might happen in a person's life during this particular point of time, or during this particular point of time lord's rulership, I think we need, one thing is we need reality, and another thing is we need objectivism, and probably lastly we need a little bit of subjectivism, because we need to kind of explain to the client in terms of what are the themes that you may face, and
Yes.
what will be the major promise during the year if someone is coming to
Yes, on what to focus and what to avoid.
Yeah.
When you say transits, you know that transits are the weakest tool in traditional astrology.
Sure. Yeah.
A lot of people are very big fans of William Lilly. I
Right.
like him really very much because of the practical examples he gave.
Sure.
This is what is important in his work, because he gave practical charts. But his Christian astrology is, I think, 800 pages long. Do you know how many pages he dedicated to transits?
No.
Just one page of 800 pages. And what we're speaking about.
I think
Even
as far as
William
William Lilly goes, most of the people are very attached to his horary, and I've only read portions of his horary work. But I think
yes, he works with primary directions as well.
yes,
He has,
yeah, in natal, yeah. So,
but even he is Renaissance author, and most of the tradition from the time of Abu Mashar, charts were lost, pages were lost, texts were lost. Even he at his time knew that transits are not so important.
Transits are, I think, as far as traditional astrology goes, transits are important only if that particular planet is your time lord. So, for example, if you are living through a Mercury year, maybe Mercury's transit is a little bit something that you want to see, because uh, it's not like discounting transits, but transit is not a really substantial timing technique.
Yes.
It is the last technique that the traditional astrologers considered in terms of making
Yes.
concrete predictions. So that is one thing.
Yes,
So,
but that's
yeah.
it's why that is why modern astropsychological astrology cannot make predictions and does not want to make predictions. Firstly, because they do not know how to make predictions because they use transits, and secondly, as Alan Leo said it, because they can make more profit of telling more Barnum Effect stuff, more general stuff. Just like you said it, they are more to navigate the person, not so to make a concrete concrete predictions.
But as it is, I have known a few people who are practicing modern astrology, but are very well versed in making objective predictions. But I think there are still two schools of modern astrology, but the other school, which kind of is interested in making predictions, is there are very less people who are actually kind of interested or supporting the idea of predictions using modern astrology. So if you want to discuss Abu Mashar a little bit uh, more briefly, do you think I should just read a little bit of portions from Ben Dykes'
Yes,
translation? So
read, because a lot of astrologers don't read. They don't read. They do not read.
so if the science of the stars is true, it is a science without benefit in it, because what the stars indicate are things which will. So uh, so this is the claim by someone else. So I'm just going to read it further. And this is something a man does not need, because if that thing is good or delight, he will get it at its own time, and foreknowledge of it is of no benefit for him. So basically, the what the critique of astrology is saying is that um, what is the benefit of knowing it, or knowing the event or something that is going to happen in future before itself, because uh, either it is good or bad, it is going to happen in some particular time in future. And what is the point of knowing it now, because you are not going to realize it today, because it's going to happen sometime later. So, and if something detestable, he will anticipate distress through his foreknowledge of it, and then distress will follow upon that knowledge, and meditating it on fear of it until the time of its arrival. And the person knowledgeable in the profession of the science of the stars is not able to repel the detestable things which are coming to be. So another critique that uh, that we see here is that if something is bad, or if something is, if an astrologer predicts something negative, the client is going to feel dejected, and he's going to go depressed by knowing what might happen beforehand, and he might enter into a depression or something like that, just because of fear of what might happen. So that is one of the reasons why the critics have mentioned this. But Abu Mashar says that people are obviously wrong, and they have left the path of discernment and knowledge, and do not understand the merit of this science, nor its benefit of this science. But these people who reject benefit from this science reject only the name of the thing, because they do not understand it. So that's one thing. So the most sad part here is that uh, we kind of are pushed to a situation where we have to treat astrologers as critics, because astrology is all about making predictions, uh, but we are talking about a tradition which does not accept predictions or objectivism. That apart, the concept of the thing, they do employ it, because all people who have discernment employ knowledge in things which they are able to have knowledge of, and wariness of a detestable thing which they fear. As for some people, their foreknowledge of things by experience, for they repel from themselves the unpleasantness with their knowledge of predictions, and they are the common people. So, so the idea here is that every profession, as I told, every profession, it kind of leads to some point, some prediction. It's not just astrology. So, if, as I mentioned before, in medical profession, doctors predict based on diagnosis, like what might happen. So, yeah.
Bhumashar, there in the defense of astrology, says that astrology is above medicine because if an astrologer says that a person is going to die, there is no need to go to a doctor. He should just went to take to make his property and etc. To arrange his funeral if he has some debts, so he can remove them and etc. Because this was a profession above medicine, and now is what? Young girls, beautiful, smiling.
Right. So that's what. See,
some of them have plastic surgeons. Of course, important to note.
Right. So that's what. See, the astrology was always predictive, and as you mentioned, Abu Mashar was brutally practical during the 9th century, and he was saying that someone, if an astrologer foresees death, so there is no point in going to a doctor, and he probably has to clear his debts and help his family as much as possible. But there is probably too much of determinism there. Maybe the life could be saved, but again, an astrologer could be right as well. So it's a very debatable and a controversial topic as far as today's world goes. But one thing, like, did you? I think we spoke about astrologer and astropsychologist, and you also spoke about the Barnum effect. So
yes.
So one thing is, as you told, Abu Mashar has dealt with astrology by having an idea that astrology is a science of daily life. It's basically a science of daily life, and preparing with the foreknowledge is the major, besides prediction, but preparing ourselves with the knowledge that we are gaining about what might happen in the future is probably the greatest gift of the gods that astrologers and people have today. In simple words, I think Firmicus Maternus or Abu Mashar, I'm not sure, but during those days, travel was very tedious. It was not so easy to travel as it is today. So people used to kind of visit astrologers before they actually travel. So they wanted to make sure that it doesn't rain, for which you need a concrete prediction. And they wanted to make sure that, because travel was very dangerous also, not just tedious, but it was also dangerous.
Yes.
So they wanted to make sure that they wouldn't die or they wouldn't face any very adverse situation during their journey. And they also wanted to make sure that whether they will reach the particular destination to where they are traveling safely and during the stipulated time, because travel was very tedious, it was very long, so they needed to carry a lot of things with them, and they need to carry adequate things, especially food and all those things, because it's not as it is today, like just we drive for 9 hours and we stop every 2 hours and have something to eat and something. That was not the case then. So people were attacked by wild animals, people were attacked by pirates and burglars, and food was not readily available. So, and one more thing, natural calamities like rain. So astrologers, people would go to astrologers and ask if it would actually rain today. So
yes.
And they might postpone their trip if there is rain. And another thing is, like, people might go to ask astrologers and ask if my destination where I'm going,
Yes.
whether we might have rain or not. the
But
destination where we are going. So, for example, if I'm traveling like 500 kilometers from my home, so I would go and ask an astrologer, like whether it would rain in the destination where I'm reaching after 3 or 4 days. Because rains are not so easy, because today we have so much of shelter and we can just do anything like what we want. But during those days, shelter was not so easy to find. So people would not really travel during the rain. So they kind of travel during the sunny period, and they kind of save everything during that period, and they live their winter somewhere in a very safe, secured, or a comfortable place. So that was the brutality, and that was the nature of brutality of life during those times. So the jobs of astrologers were so objective. Like, I have to say to my client that whether it will rain or not, one thing, or whether the client will reach the destination safely, or if there is any problem that he might face, what kind of a problem he might face, or whether will he able to successfully mitigate the problem that he might face. So there are so many objective questions where you need to just answer yes or no. So any yes or no that an astrologer says might have a significant impact in the client's life. So that is how astrology was practiced. Yeah.
do you think about this rain? Do you remember was Lyuben makes translation from Abu Mashar in his secrets that he dedicated to his students, Sadan, I think.
Yeah, Shadan.
If you have read, there is one example when some travelers went to Abu Mashar and asked them if they should to travel. And Abu Mashar, I don't remember the exact quotes, but he says that he saw a Mars in some kind of an aspect, moon with the Mars, yes,
Right.
moon with the Mars. And he said to the travelers, do not go. But the travelers did not listen to him.
Yeah.
And so the travelers were attacked by some people, and they barely survived. But when they came back to Abu Mashar and they attacked Abu Mashar and accused him of making this event happen.
Right.
Yes, and that is when Abu Mashar said one very clever thing. He said, I forbade myself again to predict for such people who do not believe in astrology and for uneducated people.
Right.
And I think that is why probably I think astrology consultation is not for everybody. And because the person, I always ask if he's ready to hear things that he does not want to hear. He should be ready. Because if people are not ready, and that is why at that time the predictions and the science of the stars was not for everybody's people. It was not so common because people do not know what to do with such information. Just to give you one quote about how seriously was astrology at that time, this is from Tabit Ibn Qara. Whoever wishes to know philosophy and geometry and would dismiss the knowledge of astrology would remain shallow and vain, for the science of the stars, which is the highest science, and among its branches the supreme science in the science of images.
Right.
So yes, it was a very noble profession. People had to read many books again to show why we are speaking about Abu Mashar. Who was Abu Mashar? He wrote this book, and many more books which we do not know. But you see how many thorough and very good written books were done by him. And at our times, do you see so many books well written from modern astropsychological authors? There are not so many. That is why we cannot underestimate and think that people at that time were some kind of savages, and they did not know what to say, and they did some primitive astrology. Also, to remember the Antikythera mechanism. It was a very Antikythera mechanism.
Right. Okay.
You probably know it. That this proves that they were able to make very accurate mathematical. Yes, can say the word. Very accurate mathematical calculations to see where this particular star or eclipse is coming.
Okay.
And nowadays, even with if all these softwares we have, we cannot make such good predictions because the knowledge is lost. In all we all see is karma and spiritual on the television, and they just this is everywhere,
Right.
all around us. And that is why now people ask when will the Russia-Ukraine war will end and etc. But how many books of mundane astrology we have from this time? Sadly, Abu Mashar is not alive to say, or Meshikov, how to say, how to judge this chart. We surely cannot do it with transits.
So, yeah, yes, I think this is one of the main things that we can bring to forefront, where how many people actually predicted, and how many people put their personal bias and made judgments just on the chart based on solid astrological techniques. That's the thing. But I think the idea of Abu Mushar was to kind of guard against, or guard from the unpleasantness, to kind of act uh, um, prematurely in terms, if there is something difficult in terms of forecast or predictions. So I think one of the other major important things, like ignoring the dignity of the planets. So I think many modern astrologers ignore the planetary dignities, uh, which I think is one of the most critical things to chart reading. And I don't know if it
Yes,
really.
this is one of the differences that I forgot to mention between traditional and modern astropsychological. Modern astrologers only look for exaltation rulerships.
Some of the modern astrologers use, but I think some of there are a set of modern astrologers who really don't use the planetary dignities, or don't believe in planetary dignities. That is one thing. And another thing is superficial understanding of the placements and ignoring the difficult placements. So if Jupiter is fallen, Jupiter is fallen, and it doesn't mean that the native is going to die. Traditional astrology also does not say that. But
Yes.
I think in order to understand what
I have Jupiter and
see,
yes. What will modern astropsychological astrologers to tell about this? I don't know.
no, I
Yes,
think
yes.
the most important thing in terms of understanding a particular placement is to see whether the planet is really at home or not. So, and there are so many traditional astrology books that kind of give us good knowledge or understanding about how a planet might actually function from a specific placement.
Who reads them? Who reads them?
That is the question that we might ask
I
for.
don't know. I will be interested to know how many copies were sold of the amazing work of Van Dyke's.
Right.
How many? People don't read such stuff. They want to know Barnum Effect astrology. They want to know about themselves. What is the sun in Leo? What is the moon in Taurus? And etc. This is all what capitalism and Tao and Leo let do this situation. I remember that when Ben Dykes translated the whole Bunati, I think it was below 1,000 copies sold. This is very low. So probably yes.
No, I think it's the reluctance to accept the truth, difficult truth. It's probably a very humanistic thing. We all always want to hear good things. We don't want to really hear bad things, and that is one of the reasons why predictive astrology has taken a toll in terms of its popularity. But ultimately, the astrologer, I mean, the main work of astrologer in the society is to kind of predict, and that's why we have astrology, and that is
astropsychology. Yes, there is a difference. Astropsychology, a whole different story than astrology. Astrology, that is why I said there is a difference between traditional astrology, Western astrology, and modern astropsychological story. This is a whole different story.
Right. So Formicus Martinus also talks a lot about, I mean, in defense of astrology, I think he mentioned.
Yes, he has good quotes. Yes.
Yes. So he has dedicated the entire portion of his beginning of the book in defense of astrology, and he mentions that the man who does not want to consult an astrologer nor hear his responses, who will not adjust his ears to the truth of the forecast, fears the truth, will make him change his mind. He is acting unjustly if he criticizes what he cannot grasp with his blunted faculties. Judges are always unjust if they pronounce sentence on cases in which they are ignorant of the facts. No one has a right to be a judge who is influenced in his decision by prejudice or ignorance. Also, one who does not pass sentence after having examined the case. And the sentence means objective thing. So if you do not really want to say an objective thing after looking at the chart, I think you're not really doing your job.
Yes, judicium. This is what astrology is, judicium. Astrologica judiciaria, judicium. Αποτελεσματικά. No psychology in it. No psychology, nothing. Nothing. Yes.
And he goes on to say, a practitioner who claimed to know the science of astrology gave an arbitrary forecast, was not able to prove his statements. The astrologer's presumption and ignorance must be blamed, and the fraudulence of his forecast. Anyone responsible for casting a shadow on this great art with lying responses deserves every kind of evil fate. So, what if an astrologer is actually not doing a prediction? See, I can totally understand if someone does not want to do prediction, but I think there should be a different name for them. Like,
yes, astropsychologists.
Yeah, so that is something.
They should be written astropsychologists, not astrologists, but astropsychologists, because this is psychological astrology. It's quite a difference, because astrologers make predictions. Astropsychologists do other things, like we mentioned, karma, manner aspects.
No, I don't think karma.
They tried it. Yes, they try. They speak about.
No, I mean, I don't think karma should be tried. So that's what I'm saying.
Karma should be what?
I think karma is a very misunderstood notion in the Western world.
Yes, I agree with you. Yes.
That's what I mean.
But they try. A lot of books have been written on this subject. A lot of books.
Right.
So, Martin Schumann books. If you have, they're very expensive now.
Okay. So I think we have covered a reasonable ground in terms of talking about the,
yes,
inherent predictive nature of astrology. So if you want to have any final words to say, like,
I can say that to continue and to probably end with some quotes of Abu Mashar.
Right, sure.
Again,
yeah.
from the defense of astrology. At that time, 9th century, he said that two types of people destroy astrology. One is the type that do it only for money, like Alan Leo did it. The second type of people are people who have not read enough and who are not ready to make predictions. Thousands of them. And these are the two types of people that destroy astrology, and they continue to destroy astrology.
Right. Okay. So
Abu Mashar said, not me.
Right. Yeah, I understand. So Abu Mashar said these things. So, and so many traditional astrologers also had similar ideology. It's not, Abu Mashar is not the only one person, or he's not the only elephant in the room. Probably the one who is not predicting is probably the elephant in the room. So
yes, he has his weak marks, Abu Mashar, but anyway, yes, and nobody's, of course, but he is far better than the modern authors.
Right.
Yes.
So, where can people contact you? I think you have a page, and I didn't know about your page, but I think you have a good amount of people following your work in your Bulgarian.
I'm working with my partner on a website. It will be soon launched, starstraditions.com.
Right.
It will be on English. It will have only traditional astrology, heliacal phases, nothing about Uranus, Pluto, and Neptune. And we have been doing this for a year in Bulgaria, and we prove that we can do astrology without Neptune, Pluto, Uranus, without minor aspects, and we can make it good and to predict events with our work. And
Right.
this is what will be launching in English soon.
Sure. I think people should contact you through your new website after
Yes,
it's
it will
launched,
be.
and
Yes.
I think you can also be found on Facebook
Yes.
and all those things. So I think that pretty much brings us towards the end of this discussion, and it was very
Yes.
nice conversing with you.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much. And
I thank you too.
thanks.
Bye.